Saint Agatha, Virgin Martyr, 251, Catania, Sicily. Last night I was in that city in which I saw the great insurrection, Palermo. The churches and houses still bear the marks of it. Saw a grand and wonderful festival. The church was hung with tapestry, and in the middle of it was a curtain like our Lenten curtain, our hunger thuch. In one place I saw a great fire like our St. John's fires, to which the priests all went in procession carrying a veil. It was a grand festival, great pomp and parade. The people seemed to join in it eagerly, and brawls are a frequent occurrence. The church was magnificent, and, during the ceremonies, I saw Agatha and other saints. I saw that Agatha was martyred in another city, Catania, though her parents lived in Palermo. Her mother, a Christian in secret, had instructed her child in the faith, but the father was a pagan. Agatha had 2 nurses. From her earliest years, she enjoyed most familiar intercourse with Jesus. I often saw her sitting in the garden, and by her a shining, beautiful boy playing and conversing with her. It seemed as if they were growing up together. I saw her make a seat for him in the grass and listen to him thoughtfully, her hands in her lap. Sometimes they played with flowers and little sticks. He seemed to grow as she grew, but he only came when she was alone. I think she saw him, for her actions indicated consciousness of his presence. I saw her increase wonderfully in interior purity and strength of soul. It is impossible to say how one sees such things. It is as if some object continually became more magnificent, like gold being purified, a spark becoming a star, a fire becoming a sun. I saw Agatha's extraordinary fidelity to grace. I saw her constant turning away from every shadow of impurity, from every little imperfection for which she punished herself severely. When she would have wished to lie down in the evening, her guardian angel often stood visibly by her side, reminding her of something, some forgotten duty perhaps, which she would then hasten to perform, some prayer, some alms, something relating to charity, purity, humility, obedience, mercy, or some effort to prevent sin. I often saw her as a child gliding along unknown to her mother with alms and food for the poor. She was so noble, so dear to Jesus, and yet she lived in a constant struggle. I often saw her pinch and strike herself for the least faults, the slightest inclinations. But with it all, she was so open, so frank, so courageous. I saw her in her 8th year taken in a carriage with several other maidens to Catania. This was by her father's orders, for he wanted her reared in all the liberty of paganism. She was placed in the house of a shameless woman who had 5 daughters. I cannot say that she kept a public house of infamy, such as I have often seen in those times. She seemed rather to be a bold worldly woman of high position. Her house was beautifully situated, everything about it sumptuous. Here Agatha remained a long time, but she was never allowed to go out. I generally saw her with other little girls in a handsome room before which lay a lake which reflected in its waters the whole house. The other sides of the dwelling were guarded. The lady and her 5 daughters gave themselves the greatest trouble imaginable to form Agatha to their kind of virtue. I saw them walking with her in the beautiful gardens and showing her all kinds of elegant clothes. But she turned away indifferently from such things. And here too I often saw the heavenly boy at her side, whilst she daily became more serious, more courageous. Agatha was a very beautiful child, not tall, but perfectly formed. She had dark hair, great black eyes, a beautiful nose, round face, a very mild but firm manner, and an expression indicative of extraordinary strength of soul. Her mother died of grief during her child's absence. I saw Agatha in this house constantly and courageously overcoming herself and her natural inclinations, resisting every seduction. Quintianus, who afterward condemned her to death, often visited the house. He was a married man, but he could not endure his wife. He was a disagreeable, very vulgar, and insolent man, and he used to go prowling around the city spying out everything, annoying and tormenting the inhabitants. I used to see him with the lady of the house. He often looked at Agatha as one might gaze on a beautiful child. But he never offered her any improper attentions. I saw her heavenly bridegroom standing by her, visible to her alone, and I heard him say to her, "Our bride is little, she has no breasts. When she will have them, they will be cut off, for none shall ever drink thereof." The youth spoke these words to Agatha in vision, and they mean that but few Christians, few priests were then in her country Sicily. I saw that the instruments of her martyrdom were shown her by her bridegroom. Indeed, I think they played with them. Agatha was the bride, the Church of Sicily, as yet young. Her martyrdom was here foretold, by which she was to become the spiritual mother of innumerable souls, to whom the milk of her breasts, the rich blessings flowing from her martyrdom, was to procure the grace of salvation. Later, I saw Agatha again in her native city, after her father's death when she was about 13 years old. She made an open profession of Christianity and had only good people around her. Then I saw her dragged from her house by men sent by Quincianus from Catania to arrest her. In passing out of the city gate, she stooped to fasten her shoe, and looking back, she perceived that all her friends had abandoned her and were hurrying back to the city. Agatha begged God to set up some signs as a memorial of their ingratitude, when instantly there arose on the spot a sterile olive tree. I saw Agatha again with the wicked woman and her heavenly bridegroom by her. He said, when the serpent, formerly mute, began to speak, Eve should have known it was the devil. The woman tried again in every way to seduce her by flattery and amusements, but I heard Agatha applying to her the teachings of her bridegroom. When she urged her to wantonness, Agatha replied, "Thy flesh and blood are, like the serpent, creatures of God. But he who speaks through them is the devil." I saw Quincianus's communications with this woman, and I knew very well 2 of his other friends there. Then I saw Agatha thrown into prison, interrogated, beaten, and finally, her breasts cut off. One man held her whilst a second took off the breasts with an instrument shaped like a poppy pod. It opened in 3 parts like a mouth, and bit off the breast in one piece. The executioners had the revolting cruelty to hold them up mockingly before the maiden, and then throw them on the ground at her feet. During the torture, Agatha said to Quincianus, "Dost thou not shudder to tear from a woman that from which thy own mother once fed thee?" She stood firm, self-possessed, and once she exclaimed, "My soul has breasts more noble than those thou canst take from me." Agatha was scarcely more than a child, and her bosom was far from being developed. The wound was perfectly round. It was not lacerated, the blood gushed out in little streams. I often saw that same instrument used in torturing the martyrs. They used to tear off whole pieces of flesh from their person with it. How wonderful were the help and strength the martyrs received from Jesus Christ. I often see him by them strengthening them for the combat. They faint not where another would die. Then I saw Agatha in prison where an aged man appeared to her, offering to heal her wounds. She thanked him, but replied that she had never had recourse to medicine, that she had her Lord Jesus Christ who could heal her if he so willed. "I am a Christian and a grey-haired old man," said he. "Be not ashamed of me," she replied. "My wounds have nothing about them revolting to modesty. But Jesus will heal me, if he sees fit. He created the whole world, and he can also restore my breasts." Then the old man laughed and said, "I am his servant Peter. Behold, thy breasts are healed," and he disappeared. I saw that an angel fastened to the roof of her prison something like a ticket on which was writing, but I do not now remember what it was. Agatha's breasts were perfectly restored. It was not merely a healing of the skin, it was a new, a perfect bosom. Around each breast I saw circles of light, the inner one composed of rainbow-colored rays. Again was Agatha led forth to martyrdom. In a vault were rows of furnaces like deep chests, stuck full of sharp points and potsherds. Under them burned fires. There was room to pass between the chests, and many poor victims were roasted at the same time. As Agatha was thrown into one of these furnaces, the earth quaked, and a falling wall crushed the 2 friends of Quincianus. The latter had fled during the revolt of the people. Agatha was led back again to her prison where she died. I saw Quincianus, when on his way to seize Agatha's property, drowning miserably in a river. I afterward saw a mountain vomiting forth fire, and people fleeing before the fiery wave. It rolled as far as Agatha's tomb, where it was extinguished. Amen.